So we're in chapter 25. In your world history book, we were talking about World War II. And we went through what was going on in the midst of the European scene and of all the aggressors and dictators that wanted to take over the world at that time. And we could see how it would lead into world wars. And so now we're getting into these dictators going forth to conquer these other lands. So we call this area the aggressors on the march. The first one we're going to talk about is in Manchuria. Manchuria is in China. Well, Japan just decided to invade Manchuria for its abundant resources in China and seized it from China for the strategic location, also that they wanted that location in Manchuria so that they could conquer the Eastern world. In 1933, they conquered Manchuria and renamed it Manchukuo instead. And so changed their name and set up a puppet Japanese government in China. They also withdrew from the League of Nations at this time. They wanted nothing to do with any type of peace, as we see the military Japan wanted to actually rule the world. Here's some pictures, and you can see where Manchukuo is right there. It was Manchuria, and taking over this in 1931, and part of Korea there, and Japan coming out and going into China here and being the aggressor. Aggressors on the march in China here in 1938. Japan controlled Eastern China, as I saw in that picture. Also controlled all of the ports and the railroads of China. They burned and looted and raped and slaughtered Chinese cities. The Chinese leader at that time was a nationalist. His name was Chiang Kai-shek. And he had to move out of that area into Chongqing along the Yangtze River for protection for his country. In 1927, Chiang Kai-shek now had to not only fight against Japanese invasions, but also against a communist leader that wanted power named Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong was very, very wanting the aggressive as China to be under aggressive. So we have Chiang Kai-shek being attacked on both sides, within China and without China. Americans came in fact, a group of Americans under Claire Chennault. He was an American general in World War I and came in to help Chiang Kai-shek fight against Japan at this time that was they were under attack by the Japanese, and they called themselves the Flying Tigers. And they had 3 volunteer squadrons of Americans that fought against these Japanese attacks, and they fought against incredible odds and basically held a lot of the Japanese back from attacking these innocent Chinese cities. So here's a picture of, the Flying Tigers. Another aggressors on the march was in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is the oldest nation in Africa. It's a very poor nation, and it was an easy mark for someone to come in and take over it, although it was way up in the mountainous areas. But Mussolini from Italy, he decided at this time, this is where he would start. They would start taking over these countries that they knew they could be victorious. In 1935, the Italians slaughtered the Ethiopian peoples. The people there, they fought with spears and arrows against the Mussolini bringing in tanks and planes. These people were shooting bow and arrows at him. Haile Selassie was the emperor, and he appealed to the League of Nations, says, we need help here. We're under attack. We're under attack by Mussolini for no reason at all, just for Ethiopia's natural resources. But the League of Nations did nothing. At first, they put some economic sanctions against Italy, but of course, Mussolini could care less about that. And then in May 1936, the Italians totally took over Ethiopia. And the League of Nations at that time that was supposed to keep peace, remember, they withdrew the sanctions even from Italy. And this encouraged aggression of Mussolini, thinking, well, man, I'm going to go in here and I could take over more African countries, you know? Of course, Mussolini wanted to take over the world. He wanted to be that new world leader, new revived Rome, remember? Aggressors on the march in the Rhineland now. When we look at this map here, see where Germany is, and on the west here is the Rhineland here, and that's next to France. Germany Hitler brought in his troops here and set up here because he knew he was going to invade over here. He was going to invade Czechoslovakia and Austria. Those are the countries he wanted to take over first. So he knew that France could come in and attack on this side. So he made sure that he would invade the Rhineland here and cover this area with his military. So he had this all, planned. Hitler was a tremendously good counterfeiter and liar. Let's just say that. In 1933, Hitler pulled out of the League of Nations. He said basically that Germany would not pay any reparations, any more money to any of the terms of the Versailles Treaty, that they would not give any money, any more money to any of these countries. Then he put forth a military draft for all men in Germany. They all had to go into the army or wherever he had sent them. And he developed an air force too. And he went on in dividing the secret weapons that he called, and they were called submarines. So he put together these submarines so that he could attack the British Navy. But at this time, England and France did not know that Germany was doing all these things. So the Versailles Treaty had limited his army that he could only have an army of 100,000. But now he had an army of over 600,000 and more, as every German would have to be in his army. Hitler was very eager to use his new army, so he violated the treaty. In 1936, he sent troops to Rhineland there, that demilitarized zone. This area was to be demilitarized. By the Versailles Treaty, Germany was not allowed to set up any troops in this area. Because France, the Versailles Treaty saying, we do not want to have next to our country German troops. And so the West then, all this was going on, and the League of Nations and the West did nothing to protect the Rhineland or to protect what was going to happen here. You'll see what Hitler will do next. So, before Hitler's march on into Czechoslovakia and Poland and those areas, we have what's going on at the same time. The aggressors on the march is Spain's civil war in Spain. So what's going on in Spain? Well, in 1936, they had a civil war, a revolution against the social government. A communist government was coming in and going to set up in the midst of Spain, and General Francisco Franco, he was fighting to keep Spain from falling into communist hands. So he was unable to get help from the League of Nations or from England or France, and Germany and Italy offered him weapons, as Germany and Italy both did not really care for the communist Joseph Stalin. In fact, they were at odds with Russia. And so they came in and they gave Spain weapons and reinforcements. So the communists then received aid from the Soviet Union. So what they used in Spain, this was just for them all to practice and be a proving ground for their weapons. As they brought their weapons and they said, well, are our weapons going to work here? So bringing them into Spain, bringing their weapons, they could see how the weapons would work and be handled. Both thinking, not only Mussolini, but also Hitler and on to Stalin, thinking how they can actually end up, each one wanting to control the world. Germany, Italy, and Russia tested their armies and tactics and weapons during this time. In 1939, Franco defeated the communist forces, and he established, but you think he was to establish a regular government, but he established a military-type government ruling Spain. So Spain was an absolute mess. On to the formation of the Axis. So now you have these military rulers thinking, wanting to rule the world, but they thought that they would get together and support each other during this time to overcome democracy in the world. So in 1936, Mussolini and Hitler joined forces and called themselves the Rome-Berlin Axis. Well, Rome is in Italy and Berlin is in Germany, and they call themselves the Axis. The Anti-Comintern Pact to oppose communists, the USSR, was put together, and it was called the Tripartite Treaty that was formed then. Because as the two powers came in, tri means three. Who is the third Axis power? Of course, it was Japan. So now they called it the Rome, Berlin, and Tokyo powers coming together. Hitler on to Austria. So Hitler made a public announcement. He says, "I have neither the wish nor the intent to annex Austria or to unite with Austria in any way." Liar, So secretly, while he was saying this, he brought in the Nazi Party to undermine Austria's government. In 1938, in March, Hitler massed troops on the Austrian border, ready to attack Austria. He demanded that Kurt von Schleswig, the chancellor, was to resign, which he did. And then Hitler's troops marched triumphantly right into Vienna without any problems at all, and seized Austria without even a shot, I should say. So Austria was just taken over without a war at all. And the West, again, did nothing to prevent Hitler from taking over Austria. Now Hitler goes into Czechoslovakia. As we know, I showed you that map, and Czechoslovakia, and this map is very close. Well, Czechoslovakia was a newly formed country out of three countries: Bohemia, Moravia, and Slovakia. And they united together to form what's called Czechoslovakia. And they had a certain land up here towards Germany that was called Sudetenland. Sudetenland was rich with natural resources, and it was in the mountains there. Well, what Hitler did is say, there's a lot of Germans living in this area of Sudetenland, so he wanted to control that land. And the Czechoslovakia, despite the rest of Europe, Czechoslovakia was very prosperous between 1918 and 1938. And in fact, there were quite a few Christians in Czechoslovakia. And the Czechs were surrounded by Germany on three sides, and there were 3.5 million Sudeten people, and some of them were pro-Nazi in that area, so this area was what was concerned. So Hitler set his eyes on that area, thinking, well, I will overcome that area and take that away from Czechoslovakia. So the Czechs, knowing that he not only wanted to take over that part of their country, but they knew that Hitler wanted to take over their whole country. So what happened next? So in Czechoslovakia, the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister of England, I should say, Neville Chamberlain, and he lived 1869 to 1940. And the French Premier, Edward Daladier, I would pronounce it that way, flew to Munich. And they flew to Munich, Munich is in Germany, to confer with Hitler and Mussolini and say, what are you doing here with Czechoslovakia? So Hitler did a public announcement to the world and to them that Sudetenland would be the last, that he would not require any other properties. And so Czechoslovakia had no say in the treaty at all. So here we have Chamberlain, Prime Minister of the British Prime Minister, and France coming in to try to compromise with Hitler, and they didn't even invite Czechoslovakia, and it had to do with the country of Czechoslovakia. So Chamberlain and Daladier agreed to Hitler's terms, and they put on a pact called the Munich Pact. And this dismembered Czechoslovakia and gave this rich Sudetenland to Germany. So they went ahead giving this land to Germany. Well, what did the Czechs think? They thought, what? We have no say in our own land. They were up in arms. They had put together their army ready for knowing that Hitler was going to attack them. Chamberlain, the English prime minister, went back to England saying, this Munich Pact was means peace. Now we can have peace. We know it's at the expense of Czechoslovakia, but we need world peace. Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill was English, and he basically stood up against Chamberlain politically, and he said that we're using a policy that's called appeasement, and it's a very weak policy which gives in to the demands of aggressive nation. If aggressive nation comes in, we want to save ourselves, so we end up trying to do a pact with them. And he said we would do this appeasement to try to avoid Hitler's wrath, but it would get worse. Churchill saw Hitler as a ruthless tyrant, and he recognized that Nazis were pursuing a course of world war. He gave England the world warning, saying, the German dictator, instead of snatching up victuals from the table, has been content to have them served to him course by course. Do not support this end. This is only the beginning of the reckoning. This is only the first sip, the first taste of the bitter cup which will be preferred to us. We need to arise and take our stand for freedom in Europe. March 1939, only 6 months after the Munich Treaty that was supposed to bring peace in the world, Hitler violated the Pact of the Munich and occupied the rest of Czechoslovakia and seized the territory of Memel, forming Lithuanian. Yes, Hitler went right in there and took over the Czech government. In the meantime, Mussolini in Albania. Mussolini seized control of this tiny country called Albania in the Balkans. Balkans are close to Greece, right? And Mussolini was encouraged by Hitler. Remember, Mussolini went into the poor country of Ethiopia, for goodness sakes. Now he's going into this other little country of Albania to take them over. And so he wanted to use this country as a springboard for the invasion because he wanted to invade Greece and Yugoslavia. So at this time, the League of Nations did nothing against Mussolini. Again, we have Hitler from Czechoslovakia thinking, wow, this is pretty easy. I took over Austria. I took over Czechoslovakia without even a fight. The Rhine River, let's go on. So he set his eyes on Poland. And another one of Hitler's last claims, he basically said, I want Poland, and you give me Poland, and I will not attack the rest of the world. This will be my last captivity of Poland. Of course, the Polish people wanted nothing to do with Hitler. So he demanded Poland would relinquish the Polish corridor and free the city of Danzig. So he told Poland, I will not attack you if you give me this city of Danzig. Give this city to Germany. We want this city. So in the meantime, Hitler set up the Siegfried Line, and this was to fortify opposition so that the French could not come through in that direction because he thought surely France may attack. So he set up a line against the French, thinking they may attack, to deal with the French while they were invading Poland so that France could not get in and interfere with their invasion of Poland. Hitler signed a non-aggressive pact with Stalin at that time. Remember Stalin? Who was Stalin? Joseph Stalin was the head of Russia, because he thought possibly Russia might want to get involved here. So in 1939, the Nazis put a pact with the Soviet called the Nazi-Soviet Pact Agreement. And it was a secret agreement, actually, to invade Poland. And Hitler said, when I invade Poland and take over Poland, I'll divide it. And you guys, Stalin, you can have half of Poland and we'll take the other half. And this pretty much shocked the world, what was going on between these dictators at this time. Then World War II began because the Nazis bombed Poland, taking Danzig without warning, coming into Poland, and Poland reaching out to the world, England and France saying that Hitler is not going to stop. He's going to keep going. So on September 1st, 1939, Hitler thought he could just bully the Poles into submission, but the Polish people got up to fight. And he had fortified the Sigrid line and the Soviet pact, so he thought that the Russians surely won't be able to attack, and neither would France. But first, he staged an incident along the Polish borders, saying, okay, and the Polish are fighting against us, so he tried to get them all, up in arms to fight, and then saying that they're moving in and that the Polish people were the aggressors when they were not. France and England finally realized the need for action here, and they demanded this meeting attention. They said, immediately, Germany needs to withdraw from Polish soil now, or we're going to declare war on you, which indeed they did. The Germans refused to withdraw. They went on into Poland to bomb Poland, and France and England declared war on Germany on September 3rd, 1939. World War II had begun. So remember that date, September 3rd, 1939, and it will go on until 1945. So let's stop there. We have the beginning of World War II.